Ho Chi Minh thought. Ho Chi Minh thought is a system of viewpoints and ideas formulated by Ho Chi Minh throughout his revolutionary career, later summarized and systematized by the Communist Party of Vietnam. This ideological system encompasses Ho Chi Minh's perspectives on the fundamental issues of the Vietnamese Revolution, from the National Democratic Revolution to the Socialist Revolution, applying and developing Marxism-Leninism to fit Vietnam's specific conditions. The contents of Ho Chi Minh thought were formed and developed in association with different stages of Ho Chi Minh's activities within both the Vietnamese and international revolutionary movements during the early and mid-20th century. According to the official curriculum on Ho Chi Minh thought, it is regarded as a crystallization of Vietnamese national culture, French revolutionary ideals, American concepts of liberty, Marxist-Leninist communist ideology, Eastern and Western cultural values, and Ho Chi Minh's own personal qualities. Ho Chi Minh thought has been identified as one of the official ideologies of the Communist Party of Vietnam, alongside Marxism-Leninism, and was formally introduced at the party's 7th National Congress. The Communist Party of Vietnam, the Vietnamese state, and current official viewpoints in Vietnam all recognize Ho Chi Minh thought as the creative application of Marxism-Leninism to the specific conditions of Vietnam, and as a precious spiritual asset of both the party and the Vietnamese nation. The Communist Party of Vietnam defines Marxism-Leninism and Ho Chi Minh thought as the guiding principles for all actions and victories of the Vietnamese Revolution. The party continuously strengthens the dissemination of and education on Ho Chi Minh thought, promoting the study and emulation of his moral example across all levels of society. Most textbooks on Ho Chi Minh thought do not analyze his viewpoints by historical periods, nor do they examine his works in chronological order. For example, in 1930, upon founding the Communist Party of Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh asserted that the struggle for national liberation must go hand in hand with class liberation. When establishing the Viet Minh League for the Independence of Vietnam, he set aside class struggle, instead promoting the struggle for freedom, democracy, and national unity against fascism. In accordance with the Comintern's line, this orientation closely resembled that of Nguyen Van Khu when he served as General Secretary. By 1945, in order to gain the Allied powers' support for Vietnam's independence, Ho Chi Minh announced the dissolution of the Indochinese Communist Party and publicly praised democracy. Ho Chi Minh thought was officially incorporated into the party platform in 1991 after the launch of the Doi Moi, renovation, reforms, which accepted class stratification and temporarily set aside several Marxist-Leninist theories deemed impractical under a market economy, such as socialist morality, the building of the socialist person, and the from each according to his ability to each according to his work principle across society. Communism, in its ultimate goal, seeks to eliminate social classes, exploitation, and the gap between rich and poor, to realize the principle from each according to his ability to each according to his needs, to achieve public ownership based on democracy, abolish religion as a form of popular deception, dismantle the state toward direct democracy and equality, erase national borders, and unite all peoples in common interest, thereby eliminating global inequalities among nations. Historical context of formation. Vietnam at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. At the turn of the 19th to 20th century, the Nguyen dynasty pursued conservative domestic and foreign policies, closing Vietnam off from opportunities to engage with and adapt to global progress. The dynasty failed to utilize the strengths of national traditions or resist the French colonial invasion. After France's invasion of Vietnam in 1858, the Hue Court signed the Harmond Treaty, 1883, recognizing French protectorate status over all of Annam. Following the Paternoster Treaty, 1884, Vietnam became a semi-feudal colonial state. During French colonial rule, mid-19th to early 20th century, numerous armed uprisings against the French took place. The Con Vuong, Aid the King movements, led by scholars and patriots, ultimately failed. Though these movements embodied profound patriotism and courage, they were guided by feudal or bourgeois ideologies, which proved inadequate. Consequently, the Vietnamese Revolution fell into a deep crisis of strategy and leadership. French colonial exploitation policies caused deep social and class divisions within Vietnamese society, laying internal groundwork for the early 20th century national liberation movements. The country faced several major contradictions between the Vietnamese nation and French colonialists, between the working people and the feudal mandarinate, between the Vietnamese working class and the bourgeoisie. At the dawn of the 20th century, numerous armed movements erupted nationwide, but all ended in failure. For instance, Phan Boi Cho's armed struggle and call for foreign assistance. Phan Cho Trin's reformist movement promoting revitalizing the people's spirit and intellect, under the slogan relying on France for progress. Hoang Hoa Tam's uprising steeped in feudal character, and Nguyen Thai Hoc's revolution inspired by bourgeois democratic ideals. These failures demonstrated the outdated nature of feudal ideology, the weakness of bourgeois thought, and at the same time prepared the conditions for the emergence of a new path for national liberation, the proletarian revolutionary path. The world context. Globally, from the late 19th to early 20th century, the world underwent tremendous transformations. Capitalism shifted from the free competition stage to the monopoly stage, establishing global domination. Imperialism, by nature, became the common enemy of all colonized nations. Historically, during colonial invasion and rule, feudal exploitation persisted alongside capitalist colonial exploitation in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. New social classes emerged, notably the working class and the bourgeoisie. World War I broke out. The vigorous struggles of the working class in capitalist countries at the turn of the century culminated in the Great October Socialist Revolution, 1917, in Russia. This revolution awakened the peoples of Asia, setting a shining example for oppressed nations and opening the era of anti-imperialist and national liberation revolutions. The establishment of the Third International, Comintern, 1919, further strengthened the ties between the workers' movements in capitalist nations and the national liberation movements in colonies, uniting them in the common struggle against imperialism. Origins Vietnamese national tradition. The patriotic spirit of the Vietnamese people, with an indomitable will, self-reliance, and inner strength to build and to defend the country, has existed throughout the nation's history. At the same time, in the processes of establishing and defending the country, both solidarity and democratic awareness also emerged. The spirit of unity and the sense of democracy caused the relationships of individual, family, village, nation to grow ever stronger and mutually supportive so they might survive and develop. Traditional values of the Vietnamese include courage, diligence, endurance in productive labor, and in fighting in order to survive and flourish under the threats of nature and invading enemies. But simultaneously, in all those processes, the Vietnamese people also absorbed cultural values and civilizational achievements of humanity. Vietnamese people have open, flexible thinking that allows them relatively easily to receive and adapt ideas from outside. While he was a member of the French Socialist Party, Ho Chi Minh adopted Leninism with the aim of national liberation at a time when many of his French comrades chose the path of social democracy, supporting social reform but accepting liberal democracy. Patriotism was the starting point, the foundation through which Ho Chi Minh accepted Marxism-Leninism. It is one of the main sources for forming Ho Chi Minh thought. East-West thought. Ho Chi Minh thought was formed on the basis of absorbing both Eastern and Western ideas, especially Eastern thought, characterized by Buddhism and Confucianism, which had been Vietnamized. Vietnamese Buddhism and Confucianism influenced Ho Chi Minh from early childhood. In his upbringing in the Vietnamese village cultural educational environment under the teaching of family, his father, who was also his teacher, and patriotic Confucian scholars. Later, when he became a communist, he continued to study new intellectual trends in India and China, in particular, Gandhi's philosophy and the ideas of Sun Yat-sen. He found that in Sun Yat-sen's doctrine there were strengths, its policies being appropriate to our country's conditions. In 1923, in his own self-written curriculum vitae, when going to the Soviet Union, Nguyen Ai Quoc introduced himself. I was born into a Confucian scholar's family, in which the young all follow Confucian teachings. At the International Communist Congress in 1935, Nguyen Ai Quoc again recorded in that resume, from a Confucian scholar family background. The similarity between the Confucian doctrine of great unity, Dai Dong, and communism made it easy for Ho Chi Minh and many other Vietnamese revolutionary leaders with Confucian backgrounds to accept communism. Ho Chi Minh saw the adaptability of communism in Vietnam because of the similarity between communism and the Confucian ideal of great unity. He used terms and propositions from Confucius, very familiar in Vietnamese cultural tradition, to connect shared values between Confucian doctrine and Marxist theory. In the article The Great Confucius, Đức Công Tu Vĩ Đại, published in Communist on May 15, 1921, Nguyen Ai Quoc introduced the doctrine of great unity as follows. The great Confucius, 551 BC, initiated the great unity and taught equality of wealth. In general, he said, world peace will only flourish from the great unity under heaven. People do not fear lack, but only fear injustice. During the Vietnam War, in the North, where the wartime distribution regime was imposed, Ho Chi Minh once reminded cadres about Confucian thinking. Do not fear scarcity, only fear injustice. Do not fear hunger, only fear the hearts of the people unrest. Summing up 30 years of absorbing various streams of thought, Ho Chi Minh concluded, the teaching of Confucius has the advantage of personal moral cultivation. The religion of Jesus has the advantage of great human compassion. Marxism has the advantage of dialectical method. Sun Yat-senism has the advantage of policies suitable to our country's conditions. Confucius, Jesus, Karl Marx, Sun Yat-sen, do they not have those common points? They all want to seek happiness for humanity, seek happiness for society. If today they were still alive, if they were in one place, I believe that they would certainly live together very, very beautifully like close friends. I strive to be their small student. Ho Chi Minh was exposed to Western culture from the time he was in school. When studying in primary school in Vinh and Hue, the progressive ideas of the French Revolution about liberty, equality, fraternity began to strongly influence him. They were among the factors that led him to seek a new path in the West to save the country and people. 30 years living, working, studying, and operating abroad, especially in Western cultural environments, he had opportunity to learn, research, and experience directly through political, cultural, social activities. He studied the ideas of Enlightenment thinkers, Voltaire, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Montesquieu, etc., through their works. He went to France, the United States, England, and saw for himself the social life in those places, which were the origin of 3 typical national democratic revolutions in the world. The progressive revolutionary ideas of those revolutions had a strong impact on Ho Chi Minh. These were the fundamental ideas of nationalism and humanism in the bourgeois revolutions of America and France, with notions of national rights, human rights, and the democratic thought whose content is liberty, equality, fraternity. These were new ideological elements in the fine culture of the West that strongly affected Ho Chi Minh's thinking, actions, and ideas. Living in a democratic environment and through democratic activity in work and social, labor, and political organizations in the West, Ho Chi Minh learned democratic modes of social organization, democratic ways of working, and developed a democratic style. Marxism-Leninism. Ho Chi Minh adopted the doctrine of human liberation in Marxism-Leninism. On accepting Marxism-Leninism, he moved from patriotism into becoming a communist when he became one of the founding members of the French Communist Party. Coming to Marxism-Leninism from the practical need of national and human liberation, from the universal demand for national rights and human rights, Ho Chi Minh applied the worldview and methodology of Marxism-Leninism to study the realities of both Vietnam and the world, and discovered for himself the way of the Vietnamese Revolution. Therefore, Marxism-Leninism is a theoretical source, a major foundational basis that played a decisive role in forming Ho Chi Minh thought. And Ho Chi Minh thought is the application of Marxism-Leninism in Vietnam's circumstances. In Vietnam, Vietnam has a long history and culture with ancient traditions of resisting foreign invaders. Yet by the 19th century, it was still a backward, underdeveloped country. By the mid-19th century, with the weakening of the Nguyen feudal regime, French imperialism began to invade Vietnam. After largely achieving military control, the French colonialists embarked on large-scale exploitation of Vietnam, as well as Laos and Cambodia, gradually transforming Vietnam from a feudal country into a colonial, semi-feudal state with fundamental changes to politics, economy, culture, and society. That transformation led to the appearance of new social strata in Vietnamese society: the working class, the bourgeoisie, and the petty bourgeoisie. Accordingly, alongside the main social contradiction in the feudal society between peasants and feudal landlords, the arrival of those new strata generated additional contradictions between the Vietnamese working class and the bourgeoisie, between the entire Vietnamese people and French imperialism. Facing these changes, the Vietnamese revolutionary movement gradually developed. There emerged a new wave of patriotic movements and a workers' movement in Vietnam. In the early 20th century, under the influence of Chinese reformists Kang Yue and Liang Qichao, Japan's Meiji Restoration, China's Sinhai 1911 revolution, the patriotic movement in Vietnam shifted toward the bourgeois democratic trend under the leadership of patriotic scholars like Phan Boi Cho and Phan Cho Trinh. Examples include the Dong Du movement, the Duy Tân movement, and the Dong Kinh Nghĩa Thuc movement. But all of these efforts of this new patriotic trend in Vietnam were defeated by French colonial suppression. Dong Kinh Nghĩa Thuc was closed, December 1907. Tax resistance in central Vietnam was suppressed, 1908. The poisoning plot in Hanoi failed, June 1908. The Dong Du movement dissolved. Phan Boi Cho and his comrades were expelled from Japan, February 1909. The Duy Tân movement in central Vietnam was suppressed. Leaders such as Trần Quý Cap, Nguyễn Hằng Chi were executed. Phan Cho Trinh, Huỳnh Thúc Khang, Ngô Đức Kế, Đặng Nguyên Khun were exiled to Con Dao. Although they failed, these patriotic movements carried on the flame of the nation's yearning for liberation in the heart of the people. Alongside the patriotic struggle of the people, the birth and struggle of the new class, the Vietnamese working class after World War I, added new elements to the national liberation movement in Vietnam. Particularly, from the early 1920s, the Vietnamese working class grew stronger, and under the influence of the World Revolutionary Movement, the character of the struggle increasingly took on the distinct features of the working class. This was an extremely important practical source inside society for the emergence of Ho Chi Minh thought. Thus, the patriotic movements and the workers' movement in Vietnam are the practical domestic bases for the birth of Ho Chi Minh thought. In the world. At the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, Western capitalism moved from the stage of free competition to monopoly capitalism, the imperialist stage, shifting from open trade to overseas territorial conquest, with imperial powers seizing colonies to exploit raw materials, exploit and subjugate peoples in most countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. That situation exacerbated the inherent contradictions of capitalism, mainly between bourgeoisie and proletariat in capitalist countries, and contradictions among imperialist powers themselves, and also created conflicts between the peoples of the colonial and semi-colonial nations and imperialism. The demand for liberation and independence for colonial nations was not only the concern of those nations themselves, but also a common problem that accelerated the global rise of the national liberation movement. The contradictions inherent in capitalism, especially competition among imperialist states for markets, led to World War I, August 1914 to November 1918. That war was partly about dividing imperial spheres of influence. It provoked worldwide popular movements demanding peace and end to imperialist wars, and contributed to the outbreak of the Russian October Revolution. The victory of the October Revolution in Russia, with the founding of the first workers'-peasant state in the world, ushered in a new era, the international transition from capitalism towards socialism. It inspired and propelled the development of the international communist and workers' movements and the national liberation movements globally. The practice of the October Revolution, the birth of the Soviet state, the world revolutionary movement of the working class under the leadership of the Third International, and the global national liberation movements are all international practical sources for the formation of Ho Chi Minh thought.